Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Trina Myers, the guest for today's episode of Rare Strides. And I am here with our guest, Melissa. And Melissa is one of our volunteers. And I'm going to let her tell her a little bit about her story and how she got connected with Rare Strides. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about Code Rare as well. So, thank you so much for joining us today, Melissa. And you go by Missy, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right, great. So, tell us a little bit about you and how you got connected to Rare Strides.
So I am a mother of five children. My youngest is 8 years old. Well, nine now. He just turned nine. He has a rare disease. He has two. And I got connected to Rare Strides because I met EMT paramedic when Dominic was around 5 years old. I met him through the local ambulances, finding out that he wasn't going to have like a birthday party because he always gets sick around this time. And they wanted to send him cards, and they showed up on his birthday and kind of surprised him. And I got connected with who is Dennis, which is the paramedic EMT. And then we got to talking about Dominic and um, his rare disease and the struggles that I was having as a mother to get Dominic better health care in the ER sector, because it was kind of difficult because my local ER isn't set up for children or
Mm,
like rare disease patients as
right,
it is. It's more, obviously the typical illnesses and stuff.
right.
And that's how I got involved and learned about Rare Strides.
Awesome. I know most ERs are not familiar with rare diseases, and it can be very frustrating that whole process of even getting a diagnosis. So,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that process for you.
So the process for me was, I mean, I guess, looking at it, a lot of patients or mothers, they will go years, sometimes even decades before they get a diagnosis. So Dominic's, though it seemed very long to us, in the real rare world, it was actually quicker than most. So Dominic was born on his dad's birthday.
Oh,
And
wow.
I had some difficulties with his pregnancy, um which was very odd because I had four children prior to him. Every month I would hemorrhage bleed, and the doctors didn't know why. They said that I possibly had this rare condition called placenta accreta, where the placenta burrows into the uterus and it's hard to come out after birth, and that I was at risk of bleeding out and having a very at risk delivery. I was put on a lot of bed rest throughout my pregnancy with him. So when Dominic was born, he, came out. He was healthy. Knock on wood. I didn't have any of those severe like bleeding issues. Um, I did have some issues while I was in labor, but he came out and he was healthy. It wasn't until Dominic was, he, I think it was when he was 10 weeks old. Dominic, I went to go feed him, and he had milk had came out of his nose and his mouth, and he was blue, and he was struggling to breathe. He was crying, but I couldn't hear anything. So
Oh,
I called 911. I was tapping his back. Finally, like, he let out a cry as the ambulance was showing up, and I could hear him. So we brought him to the hospital and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with him, but he was stable at that point of time.
Uh-huh.
That was one like instance when he was a newborn that there was kind of looking back like, oh, this makes sense now. Because Dominic was diagnosed with laryngeal cleft when he was around 3, 4 years old, which is like a rare opening in his airways. So when he was swallowing, things were going into his lungs. He was
Wow.
aspirating. So that's what happened when he was 10 weeks old, but we didn't know it at that time.
Right.
Um, so I guess when he was 5 months old, I had went back to work and I put him into daycare, and Dominic got RSV at daycare.
Mm.
And the RSV lasted in him about 3 months. And it was like he was always on breathing treatments, and the doctor couldn't figure out exactly why the RSV was, he was continuing this long with the RSV. He finally got, he got better and he was diagnosed with asthma after that. And so he was put on like an inhaler and he was
Mm-hmm.
doing good. And then all of a sudden, every month, Dominic would get high fevers, rashes, and he would look like he has like severe like illness. I would bring him to
Mm-hmm.
the ER and he would be diagnosed with pneumonia. And he would be put on antibiotics and he would get better. And then a week to 2 weeks, he would have the pneumonia again. And it would
Wow.
play out this until he was around, I think it was 14 months. So he had already had about 4 or 5 pneumonias by that time. And I had brought him to his doctors for his yearly physical. And his pediatrician didn't want to give him any like live vaccines at that point in time because he was too sick. Like he was
Uh-huh.
continuing to just be sick with high fevers and all this stuff. So he referred him to an immunologist at a different hospital that he sees doctors now. And while we were waiting for that referral to like the specialist, he had ran some blood work that came back concerning he had low IgG count,
Mm-mm.
and he also had high CRP, which is like an inflammation marker.
Yeah.
Normally, they go by this as if you have severe infection.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to the immunologist that he referred us to, and they did some genetic testing for like an X-link,
Uh-huh.
agglomeraline. It's so hard to say the long
Right.
words. That one came back negative, but so he continued to get sick, and the immunologist was like, "Well, if he keeps on getting sick, we'll see him." And we made an appointment to go see him. And that one doctor appointment, he kind of was like, "I don't know why you're here. There's nothing more we could do for your son." And it
Huh.
was disappointing because it was
Oh,
like,
I'm
but you,
sure.
yeah, because they told us if he kept on getting sick and kept on getting these diagnosed x-rays of pneumonia to, keep on seeing him. So I went back to his pediatrician, and his pediatrician was like, yeah, the specialist said that if he kept on getting sick, they'll look into it further.
Right.
Um, so that's when I asked for a second opinion, and we got referred to Connecticut Children's. And it wasn't until we went to Connecticut Children's that I feel like we were actually being taken seriously. Like our
Or
concerns
listen.
were
Yeah.
real. Yeah.
Yeah.
So um, he first saw the immunologist team there, and they ran their, blood work, and of course,
Right.
IgG count was low, and he also didn't like hold titers to certain vaccines at that point in time.
Yeah.
And he was at this point in time, Dom was really, really sick. He was sick
Mhm.
3 weeks out of the month. He only had 1 week that he wasn't sick. He was
Right.
delayed. He was delayed on a lot of things like walking. Um, oh, I missed one thing. Sorry.
That's okay. There's a
So
lot, I
yeah,
think the
there is a
average
lot.
person just doesn't think about these things, like the, all they see is your child being ill.
Hmm.
And, I too have an immune deficiency.
You have
And
hypogamma.
I have hypogammaglobulinemia.
That's
Yes.
what Dom has.
Yes,
Yep.
it's a mouthful.
Yep.
And, my mom just thought I had really bad allergies growing up
Hmm.
and had chronic strep for 2 years straight. So,
Wow.
I understand that frustration and just wanting some answers.
So in between of seeing the immunologist at the other children's hospital in Connecticut Children's, he cleared Dom for his live vaccines. Dom got his live vaccines and end up 10 days later after that get an MMR.
Yeah.
And he had these red patches throughout his whole body and these little dots around the injection site. And then he was walking around like he was like, not saying he was unbalanced. He was just like,
Right.
trying to walk, but he couldn't get his balance. And he had a very severely high fever. I mean, his fevers would go to 108, and I've
Oh,
never
wow.
seen this
That's
in any
scary.
child of
Right.
mine. So that's when his pediatrician was like, oh, okay, he needs to go see another specialist because obviously I'm not, equipped to really know. And I cleared him for vaccines, and because this immunologist said give him the vaccines, and now like look at him.
Hmm.
So yeah, so when we went to Connecticut Children's, they, watched him for months, documented what was going on with him. And then it was decided that Dom would start IVIG because
Hmm.
this was really what was going to make Dom's life
Oh,
livable.
it's
Because
like
at this
night and
point,
day for me.
mhm,
It really does make a difference.
yeah. And so he started, his first dose was IVIG because they
Uh-huh.
wanted to give him, they gave me a choice, the IVIG or sub-Q. And it was
Hmm.
like some parents don't want to do the sub-Q because they don't want to be the mean person.
Right. It's
And some
hard.
parents, yeah. And at this point, Dominic had been proddered. He was in and
Hmm.
out of the hospital. A lot of the local hospitals had, really traumatized him to a point where, like, if a nurse came in, he would start screaming
Oh,
and
yeah.
yelling
I
and was
have
scared.
PTSD
Yeah.
myself from all of it.
It was bad. Like he would hide underneath the little, the tables and stuff, and it was really sad because he already kind of connected that the nurses were going to do bad
To
things to
hurt
him.
him. Right.
Yeah. So so it's like, decided to learn sub Q, but
Hmm.
they wanted to give him the big dose of IVIG while we waited for insurance approval. So Dominic started IVIG when he was 2.5. So it took about a year for them to fully, grasp what Dom's immune system was doing, how he
Right.
clinically presented, because they didn't just want to go from the numbers. They also wanted to
Uh-huh.
look at how he clinically presented. What were his symptoms? How well
Right.
did he do with antibiotics and stuff like this? So, and that was good. Dom started that, and then he got the flu. A couple months later, he did get the flu shot, but we know that the flu shot isn't 100% effective. And we know
Right.
that with immunocompromised patients, we don't know if they're going to copy the vaccine.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So he got the flu and he was hospitalized. He had double lung pneumonia. His white blood cells were 0. He was hooked up to multiple antibiotics, multiple anti-inflammatory medications. Um, he got better, which was obviously he got better a few days later, and he was released. And then, though he was on sub-Q, the pneumonias went away, but these monthly high fevers and high rashes that he would have this like red blotchy rash that would come together and would be hot to the touch. He would get migraines and start vomiting, and it just like he would stop eating, stop drinking, and he would just lay there and sick, and it felt so helpless. And I'm like, I bring him to the ER, and they're like, "Oh, he doesn't have pneumonia." I'm like, "Oh, well, that's good." But what is happening to him
Right.
now? So it would play on like this for from from the time he was 2.5 to he was 5, and he would get monthly high fevers. These weird symptoms, and it looked like he had severe bacterial infection or a severe
Right.
viral infection. And they would do blood work, and it would be like always he has this high ESR and CRP, which are inflammatory markers in your skin, in
Mm-hmm.
your blood. So when he was 5 years old, he was admitted to the hospital because his immunologist was like, he's being admitted and he's not leaving until we figure this out, because this kid can't live a life. So there was infectious disease doctor that was doing his rounds, and this
Mm-hmm.
infectious disease doctor had walked in and looked at Dom's paperwork and was like, it looks like Dom has a severe like bacterial infection, but his cultures are coming back normal.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, I've seen this before, and I think your son has one of these very rare autoinflammatory disease. They're not very well known. He goes, but I truly deep down believe this is what he has. So he talked to my son's immunologist, which then his immunologist referred him to a rheumatologist,
Uh-huh.
and got got the ball rolling on getting genetic testing. And we saw a geneticist, got genetic testing, and it came back that Dom had a mutation on tumor necrosis factor receptor 1 gene. And that is what causes TRAPS, which is tumor necrosis factor receptor associated periodic syndrome.
Yeah.
And that's when Dom's life changed drastically, because though it changed when he was 2.5, when he was on started the sub-Q, because
Right.
he wasn't getting these pneumonias anymore, but he was
Mm-hmm.
still not living life. Like his life quality was very limited because he was always sick. So this
Right.
is really what changed it. It's that now we started, venturing into the biologics to try to damper his immune response that was going on from this genetic disease. And it would take, actually, from the time he was 5 to maybe about 6 months ago to actually kind of tame these. And he's
Wow.
actually he's in a flare right now.
Oh, poor
Yeah.
guy. And I think that's another whole different topic, that people don't realize when we say we're in a flare, because I have flares too. And, sometimes it means I can't get out of bed, or it means I'm hurting, and I may look normal. I may look like, and I could be smiling, but I'm hurting. And like the weather change, I don't know if you've seen that contribute
Yeah.
to his flares as well, because I'm telling you, here in the Midwest, the weather's changing, and fall's creeping in, and oh, I can definitely feel it. And
Yeah.
do you see that the same response in him?
Yeah. So it's weird because his like flares are so different sometimes, because like in
Hmm.
the summertime, if he's exposed to too much like heat at the time, or
Right.
if he goes swimming, it triggers a flare. In the wintertime, if he's exposed to cold for a longer period, then it'll trigger a flare.
Yeah.
Seasonal allergens, even though he doesn't have allergies, will trigger
Right.
a flare. So it's like anything that stresses that immune system out, where
Yes.
any tiny little bit, it's like, it's kind of like when you just like kind of keep on like poking someone, you might like
Right.
eventually they like blow up. That's kind of like
Right.
his immune system. You poke it a little, it blows up.
Yes. Yes. Well, I know what he's feeling and going through. So I can't imagine. My daughter also has an immune deficiency. So, being a parent and an individual who has this, it can be challenging. So,
Definitely.
what are some things that you guys have figured out that works to help him process or to feel better besides the IVIG or the sub Q? I mean, obviously, that has helped me some, but are there any types of Like I use art as therapy.
Um, Dominic, he draws. But normally, like if he's in like a full blown traps flare, he can't do much. He
Right,
lays
right.
there.
Yeah.
Um, the best thing to do for him is to give him his biologic treatments, and and like normally how you treat a child with a fever, you give them Tylenol or ibuprofen, and the fever goes away, and then the symptoms go away, or it helps, relieve those.
Right,
Those don't help. So
right.
Dom has to get injections. So once a month,
Hmm.
he gets a preventative injection called Ilaris. This is to block the overreaction of those receptors. And then when he goes into a flare, he gets Kineret, which is another injection, and this
Right,
one works fastly. Also, is the only one that penetrates the blood-brain barrier, which helps the inflammation of whatever's going on in his head that causes those intense migraines.
right.
So, but I think what he does, he likes to play with Legos. That's his favorite thing. So like before the flare is severe, if he's not feeling good, he'll be playing with, Legos, or he plays on his phone. I found that when he was younger, he used to play video games because it would take his mind off of being on the infusions for two
Oh,
and a half hours.
right. Absolutely.
Um, he does watch a lot of YouTube videos on how to draw, and he'll draw. So he has a few tiny things that he does that helps him gets his mind off of things.
Right. To be distracting from it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very, a lot of people would be like, I'm like, he's not feeling good, but he's still running around playing around. And they're like, how
Right.
is he running around playing around? I'm like, because this kid's used to being sick.
Right.
This is normal. It's not
Yes.
until he's like already severely sick, it's where he stops playing, and you already know, oh, there's something going really
Yeah.
wrong. Like,
Right.
so, and that's the goal. It's like, soon as I know a flare is coming, he needs to get the Kineret so that it's automatically, to stop these flares, because it progresses so quickly. And I try to explain to the school, listen, when he was in school, because he's homebound,
Right.
because of COVID. But when he was in school, I explained to them, he might complain of his head hurting or his belly hurting. These are the first signs that
Right.
he's going to go into a flare. And if he complains of this, I need a call. I need to come get him, because I'm not, he might look okay now, but he might go downhill in a
Right.
few
And
hours.
very quick. Yes.
And they're like, well, the only thing that we're worried about is he telling the truth? I'm
Right.
like, I don't care if he's not telling the truth. I was like, if
Right.
he has a headache, I need him home so that I could give him his medication, because it's an injection. It's not just a
Yeah.
pill.
Right.
So, yeah. But
Yeah. I
they
feel you, Mama.
but
I know.
he's doing so much better now with the treatments. His He also, when he was 3, they did the scopes, because he kept on kind of getting pneumonias right after sub-Q. So it took about a year for the sub-Q to actually um, clear the pneumonias. But
Right.
there was other things playing in there other than just the hypogammaglobulinemia. When they did the scopes, they found that he had the laryngeal cleft. And
Right.
it took until last year, July, is when he got the permanent fix. But
Hmm.
from the time he was 3 to the time that he was 7, they kept on going in to inject it, to hopefully that it would, you know, um, kind of grow. He would grow out of it.
Right.
But he was choking on food eventually, and he had struggling swallowing, and it was finally determined, let's just go in, repair it, and not keep on scoping
Right.
him and injecting him every year.
Right.
So that plays a big role in him getting better. So these all these doctors that were like, listened and understood and actually took the concern seriously and wanted to look deeper into what was going on, played a big role into how well Dominic's doing. I mean, he still has his flares, and I know he's always going to have these until like
Mm.
they figure out how to genetically change his genetics, I guess.
Right,
Um,
right. I know. There's
but
days that it just feels normal, and
mhm,
I've like him, I've gotten used to pain,
yeah.
and you
Mm,
forget that you have these rare diseases until you have a flare, and then it's like, oh yeah, there it is.
yeah.
But just thankfully that you have had those physicians that were aware,
Yeah.
who were able to guide you and direct you and find answers. And, that's one of the key things that we're trying to do with Rare Strides is to help educate physicians and healthcare workers to be on alert. Physicians are taught to not listen to the hooves of the zebra, and that's where the zebra mascot comes from,
Yep.
representing Rare. And so, if we can just change that and make it more visible, I think that we'll have an earlier diagnosis and a better quality of life for us that are in the rare community. I mean, I didn't get diagnosed until I was in my 40s.
Wow.
So, I mean, and my quality of life has just been night and day since I too get the IVIG. So, um, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Code Rare,
Oh,
and being able to alert your team in a quicker fashion to be able to get Dominic care, where he's not getting sick.
yeah.
So, can you
So,
tell us about that?
I wish I had the infographic that Dennis made. So Dennis had made this infographic, and it was really great because it was like how to take care of a zebra in emergency fashion for like EMTs, like reduce contact with, reduce infection rate and stuff like this. Um, so there was alert put on Dominic's medical chart that he had immune deficiency, that he should be in a negative pressure room, and that all infectious protocols should be in place. Um, we did have one issue where like he was in emergency room and they had put him in the hallways. And I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, like my child, if he doesn't have an infection and this is just a flare, he's gonna get an infection because
Right.
he's in the middle of the hallways. And so I remember I had a message Dennis, and I was like, Dennis, I was like, they have Dominic in the middle of the hallway, like, and there's so many sick people here. And he was like, oh no. So like he called and was like, you need to look at his chart. And then all of a sudden the nurse came and he was put into the negative pressure room. They only have one in our local hospital here, but I was
Wow.
thankful that they did that. But that limited the exposure that Dom potentially could have had. And then, really, because that was the biggest thing is that Dom would go to ERs and then he would be sick and then get another sickness on top of that. Especially because we were struggling with Dom. Like you said, you had chronic strep. Dom was getting chronic strep. And the strep was
Mhm.
bouncing from areas on his skin to his mouth, then
Yep.
areas on
Yep.
his skin to his mouth. So it was just
Right.
over colonizing.
Yes.
And so then he had to be on, what was it? Was it daily antibiotics? So he was
Yes.
on daily antibiotics and biweekly bleach baths because
Oh,
like
wow.
he kept on just having this over colonization of strep.
Right.
But those cold rare really limits Dom's exposure from the time that he's in the ER, getting checked out, making sure that, you know what I'm saying? Because there's sometimes that Dom stops eating um, when he's really sick and he needs to go to the ER to get um,
Fluids, probably.
fluids, to get
Hmm.
IV steroids, because sometimes the steroids aren't quick enough
Right.
to kind of lessen his symptoms. Um, and him going to the ER, getting the IV, the IV fluids, and getting this really, like, shortens the duration of how sick he's going to be. And so him going there for these things that he really needs, he shouldn't be exposed to other things.
Right.
And like, I won't even bring him to the local hospitals here, not because of COVID, because like I don't know.
Well,
I
I'm
could say
so
my own
glad.
struggles.
Oh, I am sure. Well, I'm so glad that you were able to get connected with Rare Strides and now being able to implement Code Rare for
Yeah.
him and to get him quicker and better care so that he doesn't get sicker than what he already is. So I'm so excited for you all to be able to be a part of this with
Yeah.
us.
Oh, I am very excited too. I'm very happy I ever really connected with Dennis, because it was like someone, when I, got to know Dennis, he really took a interest in not just Dominic and his illness, but who Dominic was as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always drop off little presents for him and stuff. And
Aw.
he dropped him off this medical, like, my ID band, where like I have an app and I could put all his medical diagnosis, all his doctors, and like all the ambulance has to do is scan it and it's right there.
Yep. Yep.
It's
And
right there. And that's
that's actually
amazing.
right. That's part of our Code Rare that we're
Mhm.
implementing. So we're so glad that Dominic's getting to be a part of this process, and we'll roll out more
Mhm.
for individuals who are interested in learning more and actually receiving. We have little dog tags that has the QR code on it, and we'll link to the Rare Strides website that will have all this information about different rare diseases and help healthcare providers know how to better take care of the rare community.
Yeah, which is a great tool. It's one of the
Mhm.
most important tools, especially because like when Dom was first diagnosed with traps, um, I would go into the, ER, and I'd be like, he has traps, and they would have to like research it and research how to treat it, or call his rheumatologist, which is great. They're calling his rheumatologist,
Mhm.
but it was like I even had his pediatrician office looking up what TRAPS was, because only about a couple hundred people worldwide has this disease. It's
Right.
very, very rare. And so to have, uh, the medical bracelet like that with the QR codes that they could just scan, and anyone could download the app and scan it with the medical information there, and then you could click on, you know, the diagnosis, and then that goes to what it is, how to treat it,
Right.
what
Yeah.
what medications they're on, because some people have medications that are contradicting to on how to treat something else. So it's just,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Some of the medications I'm on are for something completely different, but it
Hmm.
helps with the issues that I have with
Hmm.
these rare diseases. So.
Hmm.
Well, thank you so much for your time with me today, Melissa. I don't want to take too much of our time, and I, want our listeners to know that they can reach out to us at
Yeah.
rarestrides.com. Please go and read about Code Rare. You can also follow us on our social media under Rare Strides. We have an Instagram as well as a Facebook page and group. And we will be giving away some of those dog tags that have the QR code on it very soon. So if you all haven't gone to our Facebook page and liked it or followed, please do so that you can find out the new and upcoming things that we have going on with Rare Strides. One of those also being that Rare Strides, and our founder, Beth Wynn, just was nominated for one of the Gwinnett County, that's in Georgia, where Rare Strides is founded. So they've been nominated for a Gwinnett Chamber of Commerce award, a small business award. So we're rooting for Rare Strides and for Beth, and hopefully we'll bring home at least one of those awards. And that will be on November 3rd that it'll be awarded.
How
So,
exciting.
I know, isn't it? So I'll have to
Yeah.
keep you in tuned. Maybe we'll even be able to do a Facebook Live during that time, so that our viewers will be able to see what's going on. So, well, do you have any last words that you'd like to leave or share with us before we say goodnight?
Um, Sorry.
That's okay.
I just, like to say that, like, if as a mother of a child with a rare disease, I think the biggest importance is to, even when you feel like you're being a bother to all the doctors, just keep on pushing. Keep pushing for
Yes,
the answers. Don't think that you're overreacting, because that feeling that you have in your gut, that's intuition, and you know that something's wrong. Only you know your child the best, and just keep on pushing. And I think that's
absolutely.
the biggest, best of advice I could say for a parent, even a patient. And sometimes it's hard to advocate for yourself or your child, but just know that, go with that gut feeling.
Yes, yes, absolutely. You've got to be your best advocate for yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining in. And
Yes,
we will
thank
be
you.
back in a couple of weeks, and we'll share more stories with you about the rare community. Have a good night.